Hi, friends. Welcome to Talking with Fast People. And this is Derek. We'll be beginning a debate here with Jack pretty soon. And I just thought I'd be ready to go when it's time to go. So, here we are. I'm hoping to use Google Hangouts to do this rather than anything else to minimize the distractions, I guess. So, let's see. I just need to get in the same place with Jack, So that could be in the autonomy room, but I have a feeling we're going to get distractions there, so I would rather do it on Google Hangouts. If my Google Hangouts thing is... it's my email address, SuartSire. So, I guess that's how you connect to the Google Hangouts, is with the email address, SuartSire. It's been busy today on YouTube. I've been knocked out most of the day. I woke up grumpy. I feel bad about my live stream this morning. I was yelling at everybody, No stage fright. I feel very relaxed about this whole thing. I'm not worried about it at all. I think it'll go fine either way, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. That's an interesting interpretation of things. It seems to be entirely backwards. But what do you know? What do I know, Hi, everybody. So, as soon as Jack and I get connected, we aren't currently. I'm hoping to connect by the Google Hangouts. My email address is suartsire@gmail.com. If people are worried about whatever various things that they're concerned I'm going to do or not do, don't worry about it. I don't want to get there. I'm trying to wait for Jack to connect with me one way or the other. In case he shows up here, I guess. If he shows up here, we can try operating from here until we start getting flack from people. Because I have a feeling in this space we'll get flack from Hits by Monkeys. Hi, Steely Bob. Hi, John Henry. Thanks for Raphael Breno. Hi, Jack.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Doing great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, right. Just had a reasonably inactive day. Just a bit of organising. Otherwise, absolutely fine.
Great. Good to hear.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, to the extent that this has some structure, perhaps we should have some cross-examination periods, which is to say we each have time to ask the other one questions, and during that period, the person who's asking questions controls the cross. So if you're asking questions, you can cut me off. If I'm asking questions, I can cut you off in your answers. Okay?
Right. Okay. So if you're the one asking the questions, you can.
You control the cross.
Right. Okay. That's cool. I'm not much of an interrupter really. I'd rather listen to what you say until the end really, until I got my thoughts. Just in case I'm getting in the way of your thought process.
Well, I mean, I think you'll find I'm not going to give expansive answers to things.
Okay. That's fine.
In other words, I'll answer your questions directly, and I'm not going to provide a lot of expansion on it. So I think it's a good idea. This is why I'm thinking we maybe should do this on Google Hangouts. I don't really want the interruptions, but and I'm not in possession right now of the tools to lock this room. So if we do switch over to Google Hangouts, can you? I think you just call my email. Do you use Google Hangouts at all?
Yeah, I can, but I haven't seen it actually work in terms of streaming live. It hasn't. It sort of stopped working.
Oh, well, like I'm streaming this right now from this room, but it's independent. I'm just using the streaming software independently of this room. Okay, we'll just try it in here, whatever. Okay, and so then I'm just saying I want to make sure we both have the same amount of time, basically. I don't want to monopolize time. I want to make sure it's fair. So I was thinking if we can switch back and forth between basically questioning periods and speech periods, I think that would be a good approach, and it's not too structured or too formal.
Okay, I'm okay to try and stick with that. I think that's fine. Just remind me of the rules, so that if I go over it, you just remind me that it's your time or my time, just because I might be forgetful.
Okay, so why don't we start with, I guess, a couple of minutes of just basic introduction about what we anticipate this conversation to go like, I guess. Okay.
Right. Are we live yet, by the way?
What's that?
Are we live yet?
Yeah, I've been live streaming this. I've been waiting for you waiting for you to come. So it's.
Oh, I see. Okay.
We're currently live. Yeah. I wasn't sure how to do this thing. I'm not. I just started live streaming. I don't know if that was not what you expected. I'm sorry. I should have given you a heads up about that. That's my bad.
That's okay. No worries. I didn't know we were live. That's okay.
Yeah, I should have given you a heads up about that. Okay, so as far as how this proceeds then, my expectation here is that we're going to have the following thing occur, which is, on the one hand, I'd like to negate Socionics, but on the other hand, I have my own affirmation. So we've got competing affirmations, so it's not going to be a really clean debate in the way that if one person were affirming and one person were negating might be a little cleaner than this, right? So there's that consideration when we're just approaching the discussion, is that both of us will be affirming some and both of us will end up being negating some, and those are different processes. Do you have any initial thoughts going in as to how you'd like to see the conversation go, or where you anticipate going?
There are a few points I'd like to look into, because some of it things have accumulated over time and others are more recent. So I think the first one would be about our disagreement over objectivity and subjectivity as regards versus logic, and I imagine a few of the others.
Let's start there then. So how do you define objectivity or subjectivity?
I think differently to you. So I define objectivity and subjectivity as deriving from external and internal. This is information dichotomy.
So it just means the same thing as extroverted and introverted?
No. It's actually it certainly overlaps. There are slight differences, but I think in terms of external world and internal world, there is some.
Jack is super echoey. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want you guys to know that they can hear Jack without a ton of echo.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the echo thing. I gotta get my headphones. Hold on. Hey, Rachel, could you... Where is Rachel? Hey, Rachel! I don't know where she went.
Yeah, how is it?
I gotta get my headphones. Mm-hmm. Hey, Rachel, can you grab me my headphones? Thank you for the heads up, Taylor. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks. Okay, so how many different kinds of objects are there then? And did you draw a distinction between kinds of objects and not kinds of objects with your objective and subjective? Is it just external, internal?
It's the idea, I think, is that external information can be communicated to others without reinterpretation, whereas internal information, I think, requires that reinterpretation.
All right, hold on. Let me fix the audio here.
Okay.
Give me a second. Okay, we should be good to go now.
Okay, sounds good.
Wait, I'm still not freaking... There, now we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alright, so why is it that we don't draw a distinction between objective and subjective that uses any normal definition of the words objective and subjective?
I think it is a normal one. So I'll give you an example, right? When we look at the world around us right now, what am I wearing? What color jacket am I wearing right now?
Okay, but Jack, what's your definition of objective? Stop playing games and go back to your definition.
Well, I said my definition is that communication either requires reinterpretation or it doesn't, because people can easily share the same thing.
Okay, so what is the difference between information that requires reinterpretation and information that doesn't?
Right, that it is based in some sort of external reference.
Okay, so in other words, anything that is a statement about an object external to one is an objective statement?
So if it is, it has an external reference to people.
So if I say your jacket is green, that's an objective statement.
If you can see green in my jacket,
then... So I have to be telling the truth.
Well, yes, the idea is that you're sharing the same information.
So then there's an element of objectivity that has nothing to do with the object at all, then, isn't there?
So your objective has nothing to do with the object?
No, what I'm saying is there's an element of objectivity that has nothing to do with the object, because I can be wrong about the object. It makes false statements about the object, right?
You can make false statements about an object, yes.
Right.
Doesn't mean that...
So what qualifies as objective is everybody's ability to access the information equally, right?
Well, I don't think it depends on people's ability to access the information equally, no. I'm saying that when they see the information, they can both see the same thing.
And what qualifies as a subjective piece of information?
So I think if something's subjective, it requires reinterpretation. For instance, intuitive information. Say you have an idea of your head of, say, I know what epiphany is. And something may occur in your head, which is epiphany. It's going to be quite abstract. Whatever appears in your head, you aren't going to be able to communicate that to me without...
So things that are abstract are subjective? So things that are abstract are subjective? Why are we using the words objective and subjective if you just mean different things by them? If you mean abstract, or if you mean external, or in other words, extroverted, then why are you making the distinction at all? What is the distinction there for? What purpose does it have?
Because abstraction applies very well to intuition versus sensation. It doesn't apply as well to ethics versus logic. Because actually, ethics is something...
So are all functions objective or subjective?
Yeah, all information elements are either external or internal.
No, the information does not have any quality implicit to it. Remember that. qualities of information are decided by the individual about the information. In other words, you and I can access the same pile of data and draw totally different conclusions from it and totally different parts of the data stream, right? The data stream includes data of a variety of quality that you choose to make this or that by attending to it thusly. It doesn't work the other way around. There's no information implicit in the data per se.
So you're saying that any information, if you look at that information, people reach completely different opinions on that.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying objectivity. You're ignoring the key processes in objectivity, which is disinterested or interested calculus. In other words, it's a matter of what kind of calculation one makes as to whether one is objective. People are objective or subjective. Data can also be referred to as objective or subjective, and those things mean different things. We need to use those actual definitions. So people who are objective or not or subjective, that means interested or disinterested in normal parlance. Now, in normal parlance, the words objective and subjective regarding to data mean, is it external to one, or can it be accessed by all people equally, or not? So in other words, subjective data is data that only I can reference. In other words, my feelings, for example. And objective data is data we can all reference. So that's that's a meaningful definition now. Okay.
So what do you mean by equal access?
Well, I mean data that is external. For example, your jacket, right? We can all access that data equally. Correct.
It also, well, it depends really.
In other words, as opposed to your feelings, which only you can validate as either true or false, right? So, in other words, I cannot falsify claims about your feelings, but I can falsify claims about things external to you, right?
Yes, you can falsify claims which are external to me. You can't falsify things about my personal feelings. That's correct.
Okay, so that's one definition of objective and subjective that relates to data. Now, do you agree that objective and subjective, when it refers to people, refers to a different sort of thing?
Sorry, when objective and subjective refers to people?
Sure, because people are referred to as engaging in objective or subjective processes, and also it is the case that sometimes data is referred to as objective or subjective. Those are different uses of the word, right?
Sorry, when you're talking about relating to people, it depends on what we're talking about. Where is the information being held?
No,
is
look,
it being held?
Somebody might be said, listen, we have two different things we're talking about here, Jack. We're talking about processes, attentional processes, because the cognitive function is in an attentional manner, right?
Is it intentional or attentional?
Attentional.
Attentional. Right. Okay.
Okay. So, in other words, when we're talking about a process can be an objective process, and if it is an objective process, what that means is it executes a disinterested calculus by any reasonable definition of the word.
So, why are you mentioning calculus?
Because only some functions calculate.
Only stumped functions calculate.
Only some, Jack. Only some functions calculate. Not all cognitive functions are calculation functions. They do different kinds of things.
Right. And what do you mean by a calculated function?
A calculation function is one that draws conclusions about the validity or legitimacy of something as part of its process.
Right. So, do you mean that it's assessing whether it's right, correct, legitimate? That sort of thing, making a judgment.
Correct. A deliberative function, that which deliberates on something and does calculations.
Okay.
There are two kinds of calculation functions, introverted feeling and introverted thinking, both of which calculate according to different metrics. Introverted feeling calculates according to a subjective metric, whereas introverted thinking calculates according to an objective metric. And we know this is the case because it's a disinterested calculus. It's what we're using right now, a disinterested calculus. We're making external to us words. Those create objects in the external metaphysical field, right? There's no disputing this. Our video will persist after we're done talking.
Sorry, what do you mean by the metaphysical field?
Well, for example, Jack, if we were digging a hole, that hole would persist somewhere, right? In the ground.
Yeah.
Well, we're not digging a hole. We're making a video. And yet the object of our action, in other words, you say functions metabolize information. What do they metabolize them into?
Sorry, do you mean information metabolism elements?
No, do functions metabolize information?
Well, functions are ways in which information can be metabolized, whether it's with capability, whether it's with confidence.
What are they metabolized into? What's information metabolized into? Metabolism produces a consequence, right?
Information metabolism is basically a cyclical process of change. And that involves acquisition, involves analysis of information, evaluation of what to do with that information, and then the actual action, which then changes the source of where the information is coming from. And therefore, new information comes in, which can then be analyzed and decided on. It's a cyclical a process of change.
And what about the old information, Jack?
The old information, it's gone. It's changed.
No, it's knowledge. People have knowledge, right?
People can store memories of what happened, yes.
And people can have intuitive knowledge that is not memory as well, correct?
So, as in, when
as
you say
in shape
knowledge,
constancy. As in shape constancy. This looks different when you look at it at this angle than it does from this angle. But you know it's the same thing. It's a form of knowledge that's not memory-based, right? It's called shape constancy. It's proto-introverted intuition.
Why is it not memory-based?
Because you've not seen this letter before.
You've seen it changing.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, sure, Jack. Granted, in this instance, you can draw immediate contextual conclusions that it's the same thing because you got to witness it change. But if I showed you different sides of it without showing you the change, you would still draw the same conclusion. And the reason is because you have something called intuition, Jack. We have a word called intuition in the English language that means something specific. And you seem to have divested from it all its actual meaning.
I wouldn't say that's true. I think that if you're perceiving something which is not here, because it's through your imagination, your speculation on possibilities, or the general sense of how things will develop, without actually seeing it, without having sort of concrete evidence, I call that intuition. Is that an unusual way of calling things intuition?
Okay, so how does that link to the cognitive function introverted intuition? What is that process for you? What do you understand it to be?
Oh, for introverted intuition. Okay, so when it comes to introverted intuition, it's about knowing the trends, knowing where things will be, how things will actually be.
What's the process? In other words, tell me about the movement of information. You said information gets metabolized. Describe that process and how it involves introverted intuition. What's the mechanics of it?
So, for instance, if someone's actually considering, say, an event happening or something taking place, they're taking lots of specific situations, certain instances, but overall they'll see certain patterns come out which aren't explicit from any particular point of information.
So which way is information moving in this system of yours? Is it a system you're talking about, or is it just metaphor?
It's a process.
So which way is information moving? How many objects are there? How many fields? Which way is information moving? Model the system meaningfully.
So what exactly are you looking for, Eric?
I'm saying, what are you doing with Socionics? Is it a system? Is it a model of a system? In other words, are you doing systems analysis, or are you doing something else?
So, when I think the part which is systematic is Model A, rather than, say, the taxonomy of information. Taxonomy of information supports Model A, helps build it, but it isn't the system itself. The system is Model A.
Does Socionics distinguish between these elements of itself?
Sorry, what was that?
Is this a distinction you're making, or is it a distinction that Socionics makes about itself?
I think it's very difficult to actually look at what Socionics says about itself, because it's a collection of different texts which are put together and which have to be interpreted and ordered. I put in a lot of work into ordering and making sense of it.
Okay, fine. That's fine. Listen, I'm not gonna hold you accountable for Socionics mush in general. If your Socionics isn't mush, then that's fine. That's good enough. I'm not trying to hold you accountable for the mush implicit in other people's wrongness. Okay.
Okay.
So that's fine. So I think it is important to make a distinction then between the part of it that's mechanical and the part of it that's metaphorical. But I think in this conversation, where we're breaking down right now is that you're not making that distinction.
I think there is mechanical, but I can talk about where that exactly is. Let me tell you what it is, and maybe if you have if you think that's not what you wanted, maybe we can discuss that as well. But I think that the systematic aspect through Model A, where you have a clear set of priorities, and where when things aren't prioritized in that way, so when things don't fit those priorities, they move down to other functions. So, for instance, you start with this leading function. The prime directive, as it were, of the system for that particular type. That is a prime motivator. People do things with that leading function.
Wait, hold on. Prime directive of the system for the type is contradictory, because if the system is not for the type, if it's for the type, it's subsumed within the system. You can't have it both ways.
So, sorry, what was that? The prime directive is
either for the system or of the type, but not both.
For the system or of the type. Yeah. Oh, right, I see. So you're saying that the prime directive of the system, as in the reason for why the system is there, rather than the reason for the type.
Well, the lowest common denominator that you can collapse everything into, the machine code of the whole thing, you got to have some sort of collapsible machine code if you're going to represent the system as a dynamic system into binaries, which is what Socionics and I am also attempting to do. The thing is, Socionics has done a sloppy job of it from the get-go. That's not how one models systems. So the thing is, you need to define fields, objects, and vectors if you want to model a system meaningfully, and that's not what Socionics has done.
So what part needs to be defined better?
I mean, the thing is, it needs to be scrapped and started over, as I have done. I took Socionics' basic concepts, a lot of them, and said a lot of these make sense observationally. In other words, there's good observational data to back up certain aspects of Socionics. There's no disputing that.
So are you saying it's not good observational data to back up the division of information into how we define external and internal? That things are either without an external reference or they are based on an internal reference?
No, I'm not disputing that data is objective or subjective. We're in agreement about that. Objective data is that which can be referenced by everybody. But remember, it's not just referenced, it's validated by everybody specifically. In other words, validated by everybody independently according to their own metric.
So so data can be validated by people, and people can reach different conclusions from data because of differences in knowledge that they have. And
because
also,
it's not just the data that's objective, it's the process that's either objective or subjective. You're not factoring in the interested or disinterested calculus aspect. People make either an interested or a disinterested calculus. You and I both make, by nature, disinterested calculus because it's our tool function.
What do you mean by disinterested calculus?
I mean, a disinterested calculus is one that says, if I'm an adult and two kids are arguing over whose turn it should be, and one of them is clearly right and one of them clearly wrong, the adult presumably doesn't have an interest in seeing one kid win over the other. They don't care. You're working in the schoolyard. You just adjudicate the thing fairly. You're in disinterested calculus because you have no interest in that particular matter, right?
Right. Okay. So impartial, in other words.
Right. So sure. Impartial.
I think this is leaning more towards the ethics versus logic distinction, and I'd say that is an interesting one there as well, because the ethics in some sense would be internal, more subjective. It's also something which is felt rather than just thought about. It's involved rather than detached.
Okay, look, but here's the thing: you're not being realistic about it. We know that validity, for example, TE, the conditional logic aspect of the world, is universally so. In other words, things are valid or invalid regardless of the meanings associated with them, right? So we know that's a universal objective.
Sorry, so what so things are valid or invalid regardless of the meanings we associate with it?
Correct. So in other words, validity is contained within grammar, not within language. In other words, not within words.
So facts don't care about conceptual schema. Is that what you mean?
Grammar is underlying conditional logic, okay? The statement connectives, and, or, if, then, if and only if. That's those statement connectives. Right. The grammar implicit in language is underlying conditional logic, okay? So something can be valid even if we replace all the words with A's and B's and C's, or invalid, right?
Right, so the underlying rules for logic can be valid even though the content can be switched around.
But the thing to note here, Jack, is that it's universal, not particularist. In other words, one's opinion doesn't matter about it. It has a universal validity metric, okay? Now, that's not true for truth, but it is true for validity, okay?
So what you say are the main differences then between validity and truth? Because I think isn't validity
truth is a separate question. It's not really incredibly relevant to get into regarding the cognitive functions at the moment, but I would say that truth is something that involves a complex. Well, there's several different. It's complicated. I can explain it, but there's several different heuristics that we use depending on the kind of statement that's being made. Remember, truth is first and foremost a value that we assign to a statement. Okay, and that's the only meaningful definition of it. Everything else is metaphor. Okay.
Right.
So that's critical. Whereas validity is not something that we assign to a statement, it's what we assign to a manner of argumentation, which is different. And so it's like, what I'm saying is that we can indisputably agree that there exists something called conditional logic that underlies the way you and I do business with the world, that is universal and not particularist and objective in any meaningful definition of the word. And that's what TI is. Now, what Jung got wrong is he called it subjective, Socionics calls it subjective, and those things are wrong. Both are wrong.
No, I don't call introverted logic subjective.
Okay, good. So what do you call it? Objective?
Yes.
And what do you call say introverted intuition? Is it objective or subjective? What do you call introverted intuition? Objective or subjective?
Introverted intuition would be internal, so subjective.
Okay, but why is introverted thinking? It's also internal. Why is it not subjective?
No, that's the thing. You can communicate introverted logic without reinterpretation.
Okay, I agree with you there. In other words, because you can make it an external object on the metaphysical external field, right? In other words, we can talk about it, and because we can make it into an object, because you can hear my words, I can make them into an object, and note that it's a binary object that's not time, it's not real time sensitive. It's specifically a turn-based time object, which is to say, I can take a certain amount of time to do this. I can pause a little bit longer or not. It doesn't matter. The words mean the same things either way, right? So the thing is, we can take this introverted thinking. By extroverted intuition, I can make it into an object on the external metaphysical field, which you then can gather and bring into yourself and make meaning about. So we're not in disagreement about that. So you agree that introverted thinking is objective. You agree introverted thinking is objective, even though it's internal, right?
So I don't think introverted logic is internal. No.
But Jack, hold on. I don't have to express my valid thoughts out loud.
Yeah, no, you don't have to express your thoughts out loud. Doesn't mean that it's something which is based on structure. And structures.
Remember, all cognitive functions occur within a human being. No cognitive functions occur outside of a person.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so why is it that introverted thinking is objective, but inside of you? It's definitely an introverted function, right?
Well, if you take that rule, then everything is inside of us.
I agree, Jack. That's why I'm saying you're not making a meaningful definition of objective and subjective.
You changed the definition of what I said, whether it can be communicated.
But you said introverted intuition is subjective because inside, right?
No, I say that it can have an external reference or not. You can't have an external reference for intuition. You can't have an external reference for ethics either.
What do you mean you can't have an external reference? That's not true. Just because it's not reducible doesn't mean it's not universal.
Where's the feeling? Can you point to a feeling?
I'm not disagreeing with you about feelings. You said about intuition specifically.
So I said, but intuition. Point to intuition. Where is it?
But even feelings as well. We can have external reference points. I mean, if your best friend dies in front of you, it's going to make you feel something. It's external reference point, right?
Yeah, it can make me feel inside me, but it's not.
Is it objective then?
If there are no humans, then there's no feeling.
Okay, but is it objective then because it happened? Because something happened outside of you, is it objective?
If something can happen outside of me, then it's objective.
Okay, but if your friend dies in front of you and makes you feel bad, is that feeling objective?
No.
Okay, so what makes something objective or subjective?
I've already told you, is if it can exist outside of us or not.
So no functions can exist outside of us.
If you kill off all minds...
But Jack, no, you already said no functions can exist outside of us.
No, I never said that. I said all functions can, be processed internal to us. I never said no
cognitive functions are ways people pay attention. Only people express cognitive functions. They don't exist outside of people.
Eric, you're not listening to me.
No, you're not listening to me. You're not listening to yourself. You're not listening to yourself. You agreed with me that all cognitive functions are expressions of a person's being. In other words, they occur within a human being, right?
I don't think I said that, no.
Well, do you agree with that or not? Do you think cognitive functions occur outside of a human being?
I don't think all cognitive functions occur outside of a human being.
But no cognitive functions do. They're attentional manners. We agreed on that. Only human beings pay attention. Just because you're attending to something outside of you doesn't mean the attention is outside of you.
Eric, I'm trying to tell you what I think, but you keep on not letting me explain it.
Okay, go ahead, explain it.
Okay, right. So, if you were to kill off all human beings on the planet, all living organisms which can think, which can feel, or etc., if you were to kill them off, if the information can still exist, then it's external.
No, information doesn't exist without an observer, Jack. It's not information then. It's the observation that makes it information.
I think that's a very specious claim.
Why? You can't even conceive of anything not observed.
We can't conceive.
Definitionally, you can't. It's
so
insane. It's an insane notion.
So if I'm not around to perceive the table I'm sitting at the moment, if I'm not around to perceive it, it no longer exists.
No, what I'm saying, Jack, is if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it,
right?
No, but listen, Jack, then we don't know it's fallen.
We don't know it's fallen, but it's still there, having fallen.
Not until it's observed, Jack.
But
It's contradictory premises. That question. Why are we getting bogged down in this, Jack? Admit you have no meaningful definition of objective and subjective.
Why do I need to admit this?
Because okay, so where do cognitive functions occur? Do they occur inside of a person or outside of a person, Jack?
Okay.
Do cognitive functions occur inside or outside of a person, Jack? Do they answer the question, Jack?
Which question?
Do they occur inside or outside of a person? Or is it something other than a person that has a cognitive function?
They can occur outside of a person.
So, for example, can I go pick one up off the ground somewhere?
Sensation, yes. You're holding sensation at the moment.
No. So where's the experience? Where's the experience? Is it inside a person or outside a person?
So is the sensory experience.
Is being me, does that occur within me or outside of me?
Being you occurs with you.
Okay, so my attentional management, me paying attention, right? It's not something outside of me paying attention, right?
So it's not something outside of you paying attention.
So my attentional management, I'm the one paying attention, right?
Right, yes.
And while I might pay attention to something outside of me, it's never something outside of me paying attention, is it? It's always me, right?
No, but at the moment we're looking at the information
So
itself.
the intentional manner, no, you're conflating. We're talking about the attentional manner. When I'm paying attention, is that paying attention, does the cognitive function ever occur outside of me?
Does a cognitive well, I'm not talking about a cognitive function. I'm talking about the information aspect.
Why would you answer the question, Jack? Does a cognitive function occur outside of me?
If it's cognitive, if you framed it as a cognitive function, then it's inside of you.
Jack, you're dissembling. You're dissembling.
No, I'm not dissembling. I'm trying to say, what is the source of the information? Is the source of information external to us? Can it exist externally to us, or can it not, by definition?
Obviously, data can be external. Yes, data can be external. But that's not. We're asking the question whether a function is objective or subjective, and that's the question you're dithering on.
I'm not differing. I'm talking about information aspects and information metabolism elements.
I'm asking you, why is introverted intuition subjective, but introverted thinking is objective?
Because can you point to any source of introverted intuition, any trend, any pattern, which can be seen for everyone? Anything at all? Can you have any example of that?
It is true that not everybody is going to use introverted thinking on a conditional logic problem. That doesn't make it not objective. That doesn't make it not objective data. Just because some people don't interpret objective data according to what we consider to be the obvious mechanism to interpret it in, doesn't make it less objective.
I was trying to talk about introverted intuition, Eric.
So tell me then, what makes it subjective?
What makes it, as I said, there's no one to actually, there's no external reference which you say
this is. So it's a lack of
irreducibility,
right? A lack of reducibility. You can't reduce exactly why it works. There's a synergistic element to it. So, for example, an engine works because all the components work together, and it's not reducible. It's exactly why, right?
Well, no, that's different. That's a different thing.
How is that different?
That's a difference of static and dynamic, whether there are clear boundaries to information or not. So that's not whether it's externally, it comes from an external source or not. These are different distinctions.
Okay, but so what is the distinction you're making if it's not reducibility then? So you're saying it's not reducibility and it's not system dynamism. So what is it?
The source of the information.
But the source of the information is not going to not going to determine whether the cognitive function is objective or subjective in any meaningful sense, because the source of the information can be multiple places.
We can't talk about things as cognitive functions, and so to make a distinction between the functions and the information metabolism elements. And those information metabolism elements are simply how
don't even use that word, Jack. Don't even use it, because you can't answer don't even use the word metabolism, because you cannot answer the simple question: what things metabolize into?
What things metabolize into?
Yeah.
As I said, it's a transferring a process.
There's no the answer is knowledge, Jack. Mostly knowledge is the answer. That's what information metabolism would produce, is knowledge, obviously.
I could say that it metabolizes from acquisition of information through to analysis and evaluation, through to decisions on information, actions.
Okay, so how does information move through the system? How many different movements of information are there in the system?
How many movements of it?
Yeah, in other words, what are the directionalities of information?
There are infinite movements. It's happening all the time.
Okay, so in other words, you're not trying to model a system, you're just trying to make metaphor.
And no, I'm trying to explain the concepts for which
These aren't concepts, these are metaphors. You are not talking about something that can be actually reduced. Listen, your definitions are not operationalized. What that means is they do not relate to each other in a meaningful way. I can't get anywhere with you because you won't define anything meaningfully.
Okay, so you're claiming that there are quantifiable streams of information in the system you use for understanding.
I'm saying there is directionality of information that's meaningful. You don't have that in your system. You've got two directions: object, subject. That's it.
I'm not sure that's a direction. That's a source. That's a location of source. It's not a direction.
Oh, I see. So in other words, inside, outside doesn't imply any directionality?
I mean, other than that, everything that happens within a person.
What would you call it instead of directionality? Location? Locus?
Locus.
Okay, sure. Locus, fine. My mistake.
Yeah. But I think we're confusing now the process of information metabolism as the concept, and we're confusing the distinctions made between external information and internal information.
No, Jack, what I'm trying to do is get you pinned down on a meaningful definition of objective and subjective. You've tried to say that because TI has an external reference point that it's objective, but NI has just as much of an external reference point. The actual difference is the fact that there's a universal reducibility to TI and there's not a universal reducibility to NI, but both are fundamentally universal. Only one is objective, namely TI, because only one's an actual deliberative process. That's the answer to the question that you cannot answer.
What do you mean by the reducibility, Eric?
TI is reducible. I can determine whether something is valid or invalid against a universal metric, right?
Right. There are very clear distinctions made in making up.
You're right. Universe, but no. Do not backpedal from this. Now note that has nothing to do. This falsifies your notion that it has something to do with the external locus of the information. Because introverted intuition is the same locus of information. It's just not reducible. So reducibility is the vector here, not locus. Period.
We've got five information dichotomies. One of those is static dynamic, which does deal with that reducibility.
Okay. But Jack, you're trying to squirrel out of the fact that your definition is now in contradiction with something else again.
It's not in contradiction with something else.
It absolutely is. You're trying to tell me that objectivity and subjectivity have to do with the locus of the information. Now you're trying to say it has to do with dynamism and stasis of the system.
Eric, if you could speak just a little bit more slowly for me to keep up with you. If you could tell me exactly why the reducibility...
You're shifting ground.
Eric, I'm not trying to joke anything around. I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying that if something is reducible, that is what makes it external.
No.
I disagree.
No, I'm saying that's what makes it universal and objective.
Why?
Because I can get a right or a wrong answer on a conditional logic problem, but I can't on a question about my feelings.
Something can be reducible but still be about feelings.
But see, it's not universally reducible. That's why I included the word universal. You
need to make
the distinction between universal and particularist, Jack.
But in the same way, something can be external but still not be reducible.
That's true. I know, but that doesn't make it subjective. That's the point I'm trying to get at.
No, I'm not saying it's subjective. So
it's not subjective or objective, Jack. The only two functions that are subjective or objective are TI and FI. Because they're the only two deliberative functions.
So the only things which are reducible are TI and FI?
There's no meaningful definition of objective and subjective that does not include some calculation of interested or disinterested approach to the question. And that's why only TI and FI are calculation functions. Therefore, they're the only ones that are either objective or subjective. The word is misused to apply to any other function.
I think it's well used for both TI versus FI, and also FE versus TE, NE versus SE, and also NI versus SI.
See, this is why you need to make the distinction between objective data and objective process. This is the point I'm making. FE and TE both use objective data and subjective data.
But also, you sort of run away with the definition I'm trying to make it something very different. It's no longer recognizable from what I'm trying to say here.
What is? You keep changing your definition, Jack. What is your definition of objective and subjective? What makes a given thing objective or subjective?
It's the source. It's the source. Whether that source can exist externally or not.
But there is no disputing, Jack, that one can make two different kinds of calculations about the same piece of information, either an interested or disinterested calculation, and that is what people mean when they use objective and subjective.
that it does mean in terms of ethics versus logic.
No.
Oh
my God.
But also,
Eric,
why do you have two different definitions for the same fucking word in different contexts so you can de-operationalize the whole thing?
Definition.
What?
Eric, hey, I'm here because between both your channels, there's 170 people asking me to come in and moderate you down a little bit. Nobody can hear Jack. This isn't a debate; it's a shouting match.
Well, it's frustrating because he's not answering my goddamn questions.
Well, be an adult about it and try to have a debate about it.
Well, fine. You know what? Fine.
Thank you, Taylor.
Fine. You get Effie Eric now. Go ahead, Jack. Let's pretend like we've got equal ideas.
Well, I will need to still work out if we have equal ideas. I'm not sure. What do you mean by equality?
Oh, I mean, let me afford you the benefit of the doubt that this compilation of metaphor that you call it a system is worth the treatment as such. Worth treatment as such. Right. Go ahead, okay. Jack.
So I think in terms of it being first of all, just going back to that definition of external versus internal in terms of a source of information. I think it's reasonable in our common understanding to say that something which is like this stuff here, this thing, this is something which is external to us. But the ideas which we're talking about now, say the idea of a system, the idea of the system you're talking about, the word epiphany and how we conceptualize epiphany as an example, that's something which is more internal. Do you disagree with that? That seems simple to me.
I disagree that abstract ideas are less objective or external than our external realities. Correct. I do disagree with that.
Could you give me an example where an abstract idea is external based on what the parameters I've set?
Well, sure. I'll give you a perfect example. So, what I'm trying to do is to understand how one would make something like the internet, right? What you're trying to do is muse about how great it would be if the internet existed. Now, the difference between what you're doing is you're being like a science fiction writer back in the old days about what it would be like if the internet existed. Whereas I'm being like somebody who's actually trying to lay the groundwork for coding what the internet would actually look like and actually work. So what I'm doing produces something like this, where we're able to talk to each other. What you're doing produces something like Jung's book, which is a bunch of metaphor.
So is that an example of an abstract idea being objective?
Sure. In other words, the internet as an abstract idea, as a fantasy, was not objectively realized because it needed actual mechanics that could make it work.
Right. Okay, Eric, I think that's insightful, because what you're doing is you're showing the practicalities, the methodology for how to make something work. Now that, I'd say, is more objective, but that's because I think it's going into logic rather than purely in terms of intuition.
No, I mean, the reason the internet works is because it's conditionally logically sound.
Yes, things work.
We know that because all we have to do is change one line of code and everything gets all fucked up.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
We know that because all we got to do is change one line of code and everything gets all fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. How things work, the logic side, I think, is also external. Both both the code which is written can be externally manifested, and also the processes, how things are actually working.
I mean, hold on though, Jack. But I've already pointed out I could have a lot of introverted thinkingly sound ideas that I never vocalize, but they're always inside of me. Does that make them subjective?
I've already said it's whether it can be externally.
Oh, whether it can be. Oh, but I can externalize my feelings. Does that make them objective?
That doesn't. Where do the feelings actually take place?
I mean, if I'm crying or something, right?
You can express a feeling. Doesn't mean it's actually taking place in some sort of. I see.
But if I express an idea, it is actually external.
So if you experience
so if I express a feeling, it's not really external. But if I express an idea, it is.
If you express an idea, then other people can get their own conceptions.
But if I express a feeling, can't other people get their own conceptions of that?
Sorry?
If I express a feeling, can't people get their own conceptions of that?
Yes.
So that makes it objective, right? That makes it objective, right? That makes my feelings objective, right? As long as I express them.
Doesn't make it objective.
What does make it objective or subjective? You just told me it was where the location of the thing was, right?
Expressing a sign of your emotions.
Jack, hold on. When I express my emotions, or whether I express this idea, they're both objects now outside of me. Now we can both access those pieces of information equally. So according to you, both functions are therefore objective. Now let me go get more coffee. Now don't deny it. Don't try to backpedal from this.
Say that's true. Well, how does it become an object outside of us? Okay, let me get. Hope everyone's okay. I might have to move in around an hour as well, I think. Maybe a bit less than an hour. But it's okay.
I knew this thing was just going to piss me off. All right, go ahead.
Right. So when it comes to ethics, when it comes to emotions being expressed, you're creating a sign which people can then read, and they've known based on their rules and their structures, codes of norms, what these signs actually mean. It's why introverted logic and extroverted ethics are tied
So it's
together.
objective or not?
Sorry?
Well, because you said the reason TI is objective is because I can express my ideas externally. I can. Don't have to.
Yes.
And so when I express my feelings externally, then they're objective too, right?
When you express your feelings externally, in other words, when you have your face, you change your expressions on your face, there is a physical manifestation there. There's also preconceived rules on what these expressions mean.
So which function is being used there?
We can actually interpret what that actually means.
So which function is objective or subjective, and why then?
Sensation and logic. And sensation is objective because it is clear physical reference, and logic is objective because it also instantiates externally. Examples: my genetic code, the various organisms.
Okay, so why is an introverted feeling? But hold on, Jack. By your definitions, then extroverted feeling is also objective because it can externalize.
I wouldn't say that an expression on someone's face and expressing how one feels is an externalization.
Why not?
It's giving off a sign.
How about tears? How about tears flowing from my face and hitting the ground?
Smoke isn't fire.
Words aren't necessarily ideas either, but that doesn't mean that we don't treat them as such. What's the mechanism? What is the difference that makes feelings subjective and thinking objective, since they both can be externalized?
So thinking and sensation would be externalized, yes.
No. What is the difference then? What is the difference that makes feeling subjective and thinking objective when they can both be externalized in the same fashion, namely vocalized?
No, it's more than that. Whether they can actually be consistently shared, where they can actually be taken on board and learned from, or if it's something where if it affects your heart.
Are you saying people can't learn from others' emotional responses to things?
Sorry?
Are you saying people cannot learn from or correctly interpret other people's emotional responses to things?
People can, over time, pick up different people's emotional expressions through the signs which they show. Yes, but you can't actually pick up what exactly someone is feeling in the way that you are. You can try to empathize if you experience something similar. You can't just write out how an emotion is and expect people to feel exactly the same way that you do.
So how do we draw the line between that which is... So how do we know which is... how do you draw this line between that which is objective and subjective, since it's not location anymore? You've changed it. It's no longer location, right? It's some quality implicit in the thing.
But it is location. For instance, we can find structure around us.
But Jack, wait, hold on. Stop. I'm going to have to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You've said multiple times now, it's the location of the information. I pointed out, and whether or not it can be externalized. I point out you can externalize introverted feeling, just like you can externalize introverted thinking. You agreed that there's some other quality then that's the distinction you've pointed to now. Can you clarify what this other quality is, since it's no longer location? You've changed your answer.
No, I just said it still is. Look, if you look at my jacket...
But Jack, we're talking about the distinction between feeling, external feeling. I remember externalized feelings are just as objective as data, okay? Externalized.
So where's the feeling? Where can we point
so
to?
Remember, Jack, we're talking about the example where I'm crying and there's tears falling on the ground, right? So you're not. That's externalized, just like your jacket color is externalized.
There can be a sign of something. Doesn't mean
but it's just as externalized, right, as the thinking. we're talking about introverted thinking and introverted feeling. We can externalize both of them just the same way. So now, what makes the difference between one of them?
I don't think we can externalize.
Okay, but Jack, that's a lie. You can laugh, you can cry. That's externalizing your feelings. Yes.
But that is a sign of something going on internally.
Jack,
that's not
so then, what's the difference? It's not location. Then it's not location. We can
location.
No, but Jack, you can externalize your feelings. I can show you my feelings on my face. I can say words about my feelings, just like I can say words about logical stuff, right? So both things can be externalized via words too. Now, what is the difference since it's not location anymore? You've changed your answer now. It's not location anymore.
No, there's such a massive gap of difference between the expressions on your face right now and what you're actually going through inside.
Okay, but I just said my words too can also express my feelings. Jack, hold on. My words can also express my feelings. So now that I've externalized my feelings with words, or I've externalized my thoughts with words, why are one of them objective and one subjective since it's no longer location?
As I said, reinterpretation. I have to reinterpret.
Okay, so is it not location then? Is it not location?
It is location, and as a result, there's also the interpretation.
No, wait, Jack. Hold on. It's not location, though, right? Because both can be externalized. But they both can be externalized.
No,
so that's not
you're not externalizing the ethics. You've had to completely reinterpret it.
Okay, Jack. Okay, listen to me, Jack. Listen. If I say to you, I am sad, or I say to you, A is A, I'm using words to express two different concepts. They're both being externalized. One is still subjective data, one is objective, right?
But you're no longer externalizing ethics. You've turned it into computation and logic. For instance, you cannot.
I feel sad is not logic, Jack. I feel sad expresses an equivalency. It's no logic. Okay, it expresses an equivalency between me and my emotions. It tells you about my experience. It is not logic. I say I feel sad. I am not expressing a logical concept.
You're expressing it in, first of all, framed language, which is logic. You're also expressing a sensation through how you move your face.
So feelings never get expressed in words?
It's the same as the emotion you're
feelings
feeling.
get expressed in words, Jack?
Yes. You have to
expressing your feelings externally means you're no longer feeling, right?
Yeah, Eric, you're demonstrating what I'm trying to say here.
So wait, but answer my questions. But answer them. So if I am talking about my feelings, I'm no longer feeling, right?
I'm not saying you're no longer. You can be feeling them at the same time.
Can I feel by talking? Can I feel by talking? Can I feel by talking?
Sorry?
Can I feel by talking?
What do you mean by can you feel by talking? I mean, talking make you feel something?
Well, I mean, in other words, is it possible that my feelings provoke in me expression, externalization?
Your thoughts are provoking the expression.
No, is it possible that my feelings provoke expression?
Your thoughts and feelings can.
No, I'm not asking about my thoughts and feelings, Jack. Stop changing the question. Sorry. Is it possible that my feelings provoke me to express?
Yes.
Okay, so why is that expression not feelings?
Because the expression has changed its form. It's no longer something which is being felt within you. It is now taking the physical form, and the physical form is a contortion of the face. Or it can be something which is expressed through language. I feel sad. That means something based on our conceptual shared language. So that's already logic.
So in other words, crying is not part of feeling? Wait, Jack, you just told me crying is not part of introverted feeling.
Sorry?
Crying is not part of introverted feeling.
I never said that, but
it's externalizing my feelings.
Actually, crying and sobbing is the more of the emotional energy. It's more to do the emotion which causes you to cry is more often. I say it's extroverted.
Okay, you're
it's
just
an emotional state you're going through. It's not a set attitude.
You're just dissembling.
It can provoke it.
All right, go ahead. Just yammer on. Just talk for a while.
Metaphor. If you like a metaphor, I can't give you a metaphor. He's quitting. Oh no, he's taking a breath of fresh air or something. So, for people who are listening, what I'm trying to say is this, right? The metaphor is like if you're speaking on the telephone. The sound waves of what you're saying can't be transmitted to someone else at such a long distance. It has to be converted into electrical signals to be transferred along the wire to get to the other person. In the same way, ethics cannot be transferred and intuition cannot be transferred as intuition and ethics directly to another person. It has to be converted into sensation and logic, or either one. When you are expressing how you feel, what are you doing? You are finding a way to turn that stuff, that energy inside of you, into something physical and concrete, something on your face. Or you can state it according to certain shared words and understandings, definitions, which are more logical. And that's how people can share ethics. It's not a direct, uninterpreted sharing. It is very much a reinterpreted thing. I think Eric is most likely an Nihili, yes. I still think he's a Nihili. I think a Nihili can very much more easily lose their temper. I'd say I'm a more unusual example of a Nihili, in that I'm very low in my neuroticism and I don't get flustered easily. But I think there's plenty of Nihilis which can get flustered.
Your patience is heroic.
Thank you.
If I were going to falsify Socionics, how would I do it?
If you're going to falsify Socionics, I think it's a question of showing there is not a natural psychological asymmetry in people. If you could find someone, for instance, who either completely changes what we use to actually determine type, or you can find that there is no psychological asymmetry in a person, then I think you can end up falsifying Socionics.
Well, that would falsify the personality types.
Well, that would falsify the personality types, exactly.
Right. But if I were going to say, if you were going to tell me, how would I falsify Socionics specifically as an interpretation of personality types? How would I go about doing that?
So I would say, it's a good question. Because I think that Socionics, as an interpretation, places more of an emphasis on the psychological asymmetry than, say, the Myers-Briggs type indicator makes an emphasis on the dichotomies.
Oh, Socionics is definitely better than MBTI. Don't get me wrong.
But also, I think there are more ways in which you can falsify as a result. For instance, take what you think is a Nihili. If you can say that someone is matching, for instance, perfectly their extroverted intuition leading and introverted logic as a creative function, but you find that they don't then match for demonstrative function, that is going to be a means of falsifying Socionics, because it shows that actually the connections between the functions in the model don't actually apply.
How definitive is your test for sixth slot?
So how effective is my test?
How definitive is your test for sixth slot? Can you actually have a definitive test for it that would falsify?
I think that is a difficult thing. I think it is possible, but I think it is difficult. I'll explain why it's difficult. Because when it comes to strengths, they are intrapersonal, not interpersonal. I don't think you can give just a set test and say, if you pass this test, you are a logical type. If you don't pass it, you're an ethical type. Instead, I'd say, for the person, is their ability in logic better than their ability in ethics? So you'd have to do basically two tests, and you'd have to have calculated Z scores using finding out the bell curve, find out where they fall in the bell curve. If you find they're much higher in the bell curve, right, with a good sample on their logic, and lower on the ethics, then you can say, yes, they're more of a logical type rather than ethical type.
So are these skills tests you're administering?
Sorry?
Are these skills tests you're administering then?
I think you could turn it into a skills test, but you'd also need to make sure that it's about handling an unfamiliar situation. And that can be hard, and that can vary from person to person. How can you be sure that they haven't learned how to do this particular thing? Because the thing about information metabolism elements, they are more of a fluid intelligence.
Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Jack. Socionics is righter than you give it credit for about some things. Polar truly is a blind spot you can't learn how to do. You can't learn how to fake it. So, especially with certain kinds of polars, SI and TI in particular, if you get an ENTJ, you'll find they cannot recount for you a series of small, meaningless steps from their breakfast till their lunch. Like, I got out of bed, I brushed my teeth, I blah, 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 blah. Like a series of linear steps, they can't do it. It's a remarkable deficit. So striking, in fact, that you can barely believe it until you see it in multiple instances. And you realize that these polar tests actually are the only way that we can falsify personality types or cognitive functions in general, and that I've nailed it on this thing. The TI polar is the same way. You do conditional logic tests. People who are TI polar will, if you ask them, who's your mother's sister's kid? They'll say, family? That's TI polar. And let me tell you, they cannot learn it. Cannot learn it. Cannot learn TI or SI. Does not work that way. It's an inherent skill that comes with. It's like saying, well, it can learn all of a sudden to be left-handed. Doesn't work that way. Now, the good news is, Jack. The good news is this is indisputable because hold on, it's indisputable because I've got so many instances of proof of it happening exactly like the way I'm saying. And you can go back and you can reference the videos yourself of me asking these questions and see it yourself in action. So we know for a fact these deficits exist. How does Socionics explain them?
I'm not sure yet. I need to find out. I need to have experienced this anecdotally the way you have. Unless you have, a study.
I have all the videos up there. You can look at it yourself. You can see it clear as day.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that what if you find someone who doesn't fail any of your tests?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have polar tests for all the types. So I'm not saying my system is complete. Okay. I'm saying at least I've got two rock solid polar tests, and I've got a third that's less solid.
I'd also say that until you have a polar test for every single vulnerable function, then you don't have it as being falsifiable.
I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying it's better than yours.
Well, it's not falsifiable.
Oh, it is falsifiable. All you have to do is find somebody who's polar SI and polar TI, and it's falsifiable. Boom. Just like that.
Oh, so you're saying that... Oh, okay. So you're saying that there's no one you've encountered...
Correct.
And
the thing is, I was very hesitant. Right. I was very hesitant to put as much faith into this notion as I have, ultimately. But time and time again, it's been proven correct. Spacey will verify that too, and he hates me.
I'm very open to taking on board, Eric. I need to investigate it myself. I'm very open to it.
Yeah, try it out.
It's
you type a lot of people. Try giving them TI tests and SI tests. See what happens. You'll find that the ENTJs especially tank that SI test ridiculously badly. ENFJs can kind of fake it a little bit. But that polar is where it's at as far as falsification goes for our systems in general. Is that if we're going to be meaningfully falsifying things, we have to establish a link between skills and a function. And the only skills that really truly link demonstrably or testably in a really expressive way there's three of them: TI, SI, and NE. NE is a little bit more hit and miss, though. NE is more hit and miss.
Okay. I do find it a bit surprising, but I would, for instance, let's take an SCE or even an LIE, both types which exchange vulnerable and ignoring on introverted thinking and introverted sensation. It would be unusual for me to say that SCEs consistently at the time of testing, given how much margin of error there are, even the tests which psychologists tend to use, that you wouldn't find someone who hasn't at some point, not passed or failed exactly as expected every single time out of SEs and LIs, given the ignoring function is quite similar to vulnerable function. It can be used in a pinch, but it is still something which they do not place any sort of valued emphasis on or focus on and use as little as possible.
I actually find that are you talking about the fourth or the fifth?
Oh, so I know we confuse the numbers. Let's just say vulnerable or polar and ignoring function, or like the oppositional function.
The fifth slot, the back of your dominant, right? Okay. I actually find the fifth slot is not weak. In fact, it's one of the more challenging ones to distinguish because, like for example, if I test an ESTP on SI questions, in other words, about basic memories of insignificant details of linear progression through time, they'll have not too much difficulty providing them. They'll have plenty of examples of stories, personal stories and stuff as examples. That's consistent with an SI user, but it's fifth slot. Same thing with me and NI. I've got NU and NI. We both have very comfortable relationships with our intuition. In fact, we validate the external world against our intuition, against truth, ultimately. And so it's like that's how I have an understanding of how each of the slots values that's different than Socionics, and that is, I guess, somewhat more defensible, perhaps. I think more observationally consistent, but not really defensible from a TI ground in the sense that I might want it to be. But regardless, the thing is,
I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt on it. Very willing to give you the benefit of the doubt on it, Eric. I wouldn't mind trying it out.
Yeah, I would love for you to try it out. Try out the skills test, see how they work for you, see what you think. The thing is this. I get really frustrated with the objectivity-subjectivity question because I've been fighting this battle for a long time with everybody saying introverted thinking is subjective. You come in here with the idea that introverted thinking is objective. You agree with me.
Yeah.
But I can't really get from you a clear reason as to what the real distinction is to be made. And you're not taking into account the obvious thing, which is interested or disinterested calculus.
I do think interested disinterested calculus does apply when we're talking about ethics versus logic. And the reason why I think it does apply only there and not sensation and intuition, let me explain, Eric, let me explain, is that also, what also comes into this is whether you feel something or you're detached from it. So it's involved or detached, which is specific to ethics versus logic, not whereas
I agree it's specific to ethics versus logic. That's why there's only two functions that are objective or subjective, TI or FI. Those are the only deliberative functions. Using the word in any other way is messing it up, because ultimately you have to go to locus of information, which we've already agreed doesn't work.
Eric, let me explain. So when it comes to detached and involved, right, it's swapped around. When it comes to sensation, that is actually involved, whereas intuition is detached. So
it's not objective or subjective, though.
So I was saying partiality in and of itself is not just subjective. Partiality also suggests that something is felt, something which is the emotions can be, say, throwing off the cool, calculated decision making.
You're correct that experience is a vector we need to consider. Experience versus communication. So there are two fundamental fields, right? The communicative field and the experiential field. That is true. Those are divided into two each, an external and an internal, obviously. That's not, it shouldn't be in any dispute. That shouldn't be in any dispute, because we have the internet, that's the external metaphysical field. We know what the external physical field is. We know sensations inside of our body, and we also have thoughts inside of our heads. We know there are four fields. Okay, that should not be in any dispute. And if you haven't taken that into account,
I'm just trying to figure out what these four fields are, because I think there is certainly a field of potentiality rather than actuality, which I imagine would be like intuition, sensation. I think there's also a field of...
But sensation is not potentiality. Sensation is actuality.
No, I agree. Yes, sensation is actuality. Potentiality would be intuition.
So
yes.
What's the difference between potentiality and actuality? Do you have an
answer? I think that potentiality is not here.
Okay, so no. The answer is the kind of time that's used. In other words, if you have a real-time process, then there is no past and future, there's only present, right? But if you have a turn-based time movement, in other words, using language, and things are binary and collapsible into objects, then you have a turn-based time environment, and you can have past and future. So we have to account for the time flow in each of these environments differently. And Socionics doesn't do that. Among other things, it doesn't do. These things are important. It's like the prerequisite to doing it correctly is to analyze what is actual human being, how do they interact in an actual environment.
Eric, I'm struggling here, because I don't see how these are important. But a lot of the terminology and definition you're using do seem quite arcane to me. So it's difficult for me to understand exactly why this is important. It may take some more patience on your part just to make sure that I understand.
Now, here's the thing, Jack. If we were to switch roles and you were to start asking me a lot of questions, you discover that I would have answers to all of them. I wouldn't dissemble. I'd give you clear-cut answers that linked to other answers. In other words, my terms and my definitions would be operationalized. I wouldn't dissemble. If you want to change positions and try to negate me, you'd find it tough sledding indeed. I'd have answers for everything. The fact is, you've done an excellent job of dancing. But that's what you've been doing the whole time. On the subjectivity question, you have provided no meaningful distinctions. None.
I disagree.
How much of a factor is locus of information or display?
Sorry?
Listen, Jack. You were very clear. It had to do with the location of the information, things that could be externalized. An exact quote from you, something very similar to an exact quote. Listen to me. Is things that can be externalized are objective. Were you misspeaking when you said that?
Hang on, let me just quickly move rooms, because my sister-in-law to be needs to sleep in this room. I'll be just back in a second. Right. Okay. So, okay. Night night. So, what I think is that I've tried to give my definition, and I can talk about it in two ways. But I'm not sure that you understand what I'm trying to say. I need to make this clear as possible. So I'm not trying to dance. I'm trying to make it as clear as I can. So when it comes to the locus of information, where it can it exist outside or not? And you talked about externalizing, say, ethics, externalizing feeling. But I said, but you've had to reinterpret it. You had to convert into something which is more concrete,
Yeah, you did
more.
say that. I know.
And what I've tried to say is, at the very beginning, what I said was, if something is internal, it can't be externalized without reconstitution, without changing its form, being translated into something else.
Okay, so
So you,
why is it that the why is it though? But hold on, isn't proving that um isn't proving that proving something using logic, doesn't it start off, if I begin with expressing something that is not yet proved, right? Isn't the process of then proving it a process of
Eric, you
using
cut off a bit.
Rachel?
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Rachel sat on the
Keyboard.
Someone asked about my yellow flower. I like boutonnieres.
See, that's tea puller.
Rachel sat on the keyboard and muted me by accident. Okay, so I still don't understand. Okay, you're saying if I say I feel sad, I've converted my emotions into words. If I cry, I've converted my emotions into tears, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why is it that the physical experience of emotions, namely the tightening of the throat, the expression of tears, isn't part of the emotion?
I think it's certainly created by the emotion. I think it's certainly stimulated by the emotion.
But what is the emotion?
What gives the emotion? What you're feeling inside.
But what if I'm feeling a tight throat and I'm feeling tears streaming down my face?
I think that is something which people who are very weak in ethics experience. I myself, I think, would also agree that when I actually get emotions, my body reacts without my mind actually registering how I'm actually feel. I've actually found that there's been a time where actually I once burst into tears, and I wasn't really acknowledging how I was feeling inside. I was acknowledging my body was actually reacting to an emotion which I didn't actually acknowledge. Whereas when I talk to people who are better at ethics than me, they can talk about something which they are experiencing internally, which is not something which is just how they're physically reacting to how they feel, as an emotional or a mental pain. And we have a meaningful concept for that in our society, I think.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if I can express something externally without converting it from something else into words, in other words, if its extant state is words, then it is objective.
Yes.
Okay, so
without converting to something else.
if in fact I've got a intuitive idea of something that's complete, for example, the solution to a problem, and I say that solution, and then I have to work forward from that to convert it into a logical explanation, then it's no longer objective. Now it's subjective.
Yeah. No, if exactly as soon as for you other someone to pick it up, it has to be concretized as much as possible.
Okay,
yes.
no. But
So
what I'm saying specifically, Jack, is let's say I go, I know what the answer is. It's 3 red hats. To a logical question like the red hats question. I've intuited the answer. I got a gist of a sense that I can parse it out once I lay it out there, but I haven't parsed it out yet. Now, once I do lay it out there, I parse it out externally. Has the logical truth of it been rendered from subjective to objective, or was it the same the whole time?
So I'm trying
Has the logical validity of it changed? In other words, I was right before I explained it, and I'm right after I explained it. The objectivity or subjectivity of the validity of it changed during that process?
I don't think the validity of it changed. I think if you've gotten out So I'm just trying to understand your example. The three red hats. What do you mean by that?
Whatever. Example logic question X. The answer is three red hats. Okay. Now there's an explanation. There's an explanation to the answer that explains why it's three red hats and not something else. Okay. But I've intuited the answer. The answer is correct. In other words, it's objectively so that the argument is valid with that answer. But I haven't explained it yet. I explain it once I put it out there. I explain it externally. Now, what I'm asking you is, was the conclusion subjective until I rendered it the explanation? Or was it objectively so, regardless of the explanation being rendered?
The conclusion was never intuition. The conclusion was logic.
No, I said the parameters of the question. The conclusion was derived intuitively, as it often is by intuitives.
So how was, if it's you're saying it's a logic question, yes?
But it doesn't mean one can't intuit the. Listen, Jack. A lot of NFJs, INFJs in particular, will intuit the answers to logic questions correctly, and then will have to struggle to explain with their TI exactly why it is the case that they are correct. Okay, that's just something that NI does. But the fact is, when it's right, and what it's cued in on are some objective heuristics that it uses, because the objectivity of the heuristics relates to the accessibility of the data to everybody in that instance. And they've used what would be called a disinterested form of knowing if you were going to misapply the term objective or subjective to NI. In other words, they've chosen to try to determine what's universally true rather than what is personally true, which is why we need to distinguish between the particular and the universal.
But you're still saying it's right or wrong. I'm not sure that's how intuition works.
But Jack, listen. The question has a right answer, and every other answer is wrong. Okay. So the person has intuited the correct answer, right?
Yes.
Now, was that intuition subjective?
As soon as you're saying something has a right answer as a wrong answer, you're already going into logic.
Well, because the question exists outside of the person.
Right.
The question is an object that exists outside of the person. Now, what we're trying to do is pin you down on the fact that processes are different than objects.
I think that's processes different objects. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yes.
Okay. So never mind. Okay. I just feel like I'm banging my head against the wall.
I think we reached a bridge somewhere. You're just trying to.
You're still fighting me on some basic stuff that you shouldn't be fighting me on, but that's fine, whatever.
Well, if it's a case I'm fighting on them, Eric, why is it that I'm fighting on them? I'm not trying to be argumentative for the sake of being argumentative. I'm trying to understand.
But because you're shifting ground and changing your answers and stuff, and you're not agreeing that we ought to have a meaningful definition of the terms. I provided a much better definition, which is we use the word objective and subjective in two different ways. One of them refers to data that is universally accessible, or essentially so, is data that we call objective. Data that only an individual can access or legitimize is data we call subjective. So your feelings comprise subjective data. Nobody's disputing that. We're on the same page there. Words outside of one comprise objective data. No one's disputing that. We're on the same page there. Now note here, crying also comprises objective data. That doesn't mean it's objective data about something that's an objective calculus within somebody, because we need to make that distinction. So once we realize we use the word objective and subjective in two different ways, and we need to always distinguish which way we're using it, then we realize that in fact agents either exercise an objective or a subjective calculus, and they do so about data that can be termed either objective or subjective depending on where the location of the data is. So, in other words, I've incorporated the various mishmash of things you're saying into an actual definition. But instead of saying, you're right, Eric, about this definition, you continue to dissemble.
No, I'm just having difficulty following you a lot, Eric, because you speak quickly and use lots of arcane definitions of words.
I'm not using arcane definitions. I'm talking about data, objectivity, subjectivity, locations of data, and the interested or disinterestedness of calculation. That's not arcane at all. There's nothing arcane here. They're the same words you're using.
It just doesn't seem there are lots of words you are using which weren't familiar to me. That's why I keep on asking you, what does that mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? Just so I make sure we're on the same page. It's
Oh,
not
I want to be
dissembling.
on the same page too here. Um, MLK, if you don't mind, we're trying to have an actual conversation here about something. Thanks, appreciate it. I got spite monkeys, Jack. These
I'm not
people.
trying. Yeah, I'm not trying to piss you off, Eric.
Let me pause for a second, Jack. You're not
Yeah.
pissing me off. I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated because this is what I anticipated, which is we're not really making any progress because whatever. The point is, let me take a break here from this conversation and talk about the spite monkeys. I have got this group of people, including like variety of people, but these spite monkeys who are just absolutely obsessed with hating me all the time, and like thumbs downing my videos and leaving nasty comments and interfering with my shit like this, and it's like they're such hateful little spiteful. Oh my god! But the thing that's interesting is they devote huge amounts of their life to me. They devote huge amounts of their life to me, though. Is the weird thing.
It can happen. People can get hatred, but why is there this hatred?
They have their reasons, you know. People always have their reasons.
Because I know if there are people who hate me, I try to find out exactly why they hate me, and if it's something which I can actually fix, I usually try to fix. I usually try to have a conversation with them to try and bridge that, because otherwise it can lead to trouble.
Yeah, I always try to have straightforward, reasonable conversations with people, but some people can't handle, having a fair conversation.
Not that we can't. I think it's a question of losing temper, though. Like for me, I feel that if long as I don't lose my temper, and I try to just make sure that I wait until they calm down, and then I can have more of a conversation with them, then eventually we can reach a point of honesty and being on the same page. It takes a bit of time, but unless they have something to defend, they're on the defense about something.
The thing is, I take a slightly different approach to it. I always think if the person is willing to be honest and work with me, we will get somewhere. But like with the objectivity subjectivity question, I've given you a preferable definition. Now you've not said why my definition is not preferable.
As it's based on the shared reference of information.
As it makes a reasonable distinction between that we need to draw a distinction between how we use the term in terms of processes and how we use the term in terms of data. That we use the term in two different ways.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure where processes and data comes in here.
Well, for example, if I'm being objective, quote unquote, about a question, I'm being fair about it. I'm using an impartial approach to it, right? Whereas if the data is objective, that's a different meaning of the word, right?
If you're being objective about the process, that's different to being objective about the data.
Listen, I can say you can access the objective data about this scientific experiment over here, and somebody's logged objective data, right? Now I'm talking about data. I'm not talking about people. I'm not talking about processes. I'm talking about the data. In other words, the data is objective because it's something that one can like the size of this box. You can measure it yourself. It's objective data, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Exactly.
Now, I might go and approach that box. I might really want that box to be bigger than it is, and my bias, quote unquote, might cause me to not be objective about the objective data. To take a subjective calculus on it and say, no, it's actually a foot bigger than it is because I really want this thing to fit inside of it. And I might try to force that thing in there and tape it all shut, all big and round, and I might do that.
Yeah.
So we do know that there's two different meanings of the words objective and subjective. In other words, the data can be objective, but I can still be subjective about it, right?
Yeah, you can have subjectivity interfere with your attempts to measure objectivity.
Sure. So, in other words, people can be objective in their calculation. That means that they are paying attention to the objective data, not to their subjective impulses, right?
Right.
And people can be subjective in their interpretations or calculations, right?
Right. But also an important point there is that also you're detaching from how you feel to make a more unfeeling judgment, a dispassionate judgment, right?
Well, correct, because FI and TI are two flip sides of the the same process, which is a deliberative process, which is the only kind of process about which we can have objectivity or objectivity being a meaningful qualifier.
So that's the thing. I think that yes, this very much applies to thinking and feeling. But when I think of object, maybe it's this. Maybe in terms of our semantic difference, you see the division of objectivity and subjectivity is one where being external and detached are together, and being internal and involved or feeling the thing is
here's the thing. There's a third
also
perspective.
Together.
There's actually a third perspective, Jack, and this is why you keep running into trouble when I ask you these questions. It's agential. So, in other words, there's objective, which is of the object, subjective, which is of the subject. That is, say, a subject being one who takes action in the world. And then there's agential, which is being of the agent, which is the person that doesn't necessarily take action externally at all. So if we don't account for all three perspectives, as almost nobody does, then we're going to fall short here, because we need to account for all three perspectives. It's not just objective and subjective, it's agential as well, because we do have that proprietary plane, so to speak, the privacy plane, where we don't necessarily have to externalize. I can TI all I want and not externalize it, and it's still objective, right?
This is where it gets getting a bit arcane for me.
Well, this is why I made very clear the distinction. I didn't give you an arcane term and not define it. I gave you very clear distinction as to what those things are, and I used multiple terms so that none of the terms, so I could not possibly be accused of that.
Okay, so agential. Let me just try to reiterate back to you, just so I make sure I'm on the same page as you. So agential is where someone is thinking about something but not taking action on it. Is that what you said? If not, tell me if I'm wrong.
Right, correct. That there's an internal. Right. That we think about a subject. Subjects always take. If you think about language, right? Subjects take some sort of action or engage some sort of linking verb or predicate of some sort. And so the question then is there another frame of reference where we really need to account for the distinction between I and he or she, namely that the agent acting as an agent, we often will ascribe to somebody else some internal motivation, and that will be referencing sort of their agential plane. Well, you said this, but you meant that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, given that we do really have another kind of subject that's an agent, that it keeps, like, for example, we know that we can't talk about location because TI is objective regardless, right, of whether it occurs within me or outside of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the locus of information then is not relevant here to the objectivity or subjectivity, correct?
I think so. Sorry, I just got a little bit distracted, and I apologize because I just had my first ever super sticker. And I've never had a super sticker before, so that's just excited me a little bit. So my subjectivity is interfering with my objectivity here. So Thank you, Macrophage. Guys, although I love super stickers, I'm trying to have a debate. So this is going to excite me and make me not less good in the debate. So
all right, well,
I appreciate it.
Look, the thing is...
Sorry.
I think what... I'm tired of trying to pin you down.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't think that I've been shifting that much. I feel as if I'm trying to wade through the shifting stands of what you're saying to me.
Then why don't you ask me questions and see how a proper answer sounds?
I'm just trying to pin it down. So I remember when you put together your document for the subjectivity of extroverted thinking, and you said that it was situational. Is that right? But you said the reason why it's subjective, extroverted thinking is subjective, is because it's based on situational praxis.
Well, I would say it uses a subjective calculus to determine whether it's achieved legitimacy, namely whether or not you've achieved your own goal is a subjective calculus. I'd say that it incorporates objective and subjective data in its interface with a physical dynamic system.
I see. Right, I see. Okay. So because it's about what works for you rather than necessarily works for others, that makes it more subjective.
I'm saying that the ultimate validity of whether or not the TE has worked, in other words, achieved the desired outcome, is determined against your own subjective goal. So in other words, it may work for me, but it might not work. Like, for example, when I was asked to build a chicken coop at my last house, I built a chicken coop, but what I considered to be adequate for the chicken coop was not considered necessarily adequate for the chicken coop by the other person who prioritized how it looked more. So from, my TE was inadequate because my ultimate goal was to make her happy, not really to have a good chicken coop.
I see. So it seemed to work for you, but it didn't actually work for her.
Well, I didn't keep in mind my actual goal clearly enough, right?
So that's interesting, because I think someone else can hear that story and they can see whether it worked or it didn't work.
No, they'd have to ask her, because my goal is subjective. It's making her happy.
All right, the goal was to make her happy, and you could.
As all TE goals are always subjective.
Right, so someone can say, okay, looking at the story, I could look at that story and say, you did the thing, making the chicken coop, and it didn't make her happy. I then know objectively that didn't work. You tried something, it didn't work. The processes seem to be, these mechanical processes seem to me to be objectively verifiable. It didn't make her happy.
Well, but it's objectively verifiable against, yes, I mean, sure. If I define my subjective metric clearly enough for other people, then they can check to see whether it's met my subjective metric or not. However, the ultimate adjudicator of that is me. If I'm happy with it, then I'm happy with it, right? So the thing is, now some TE solutions are obviously going to need to validate more universally than others, but then that's the subjective goal in that instance. The thing about it is, if I want to make a ramp for a wheelchair or something, my desired goal is for it to be universally accessible by people in wheelchairs. So if it's too steep or something, then it's not a good outcome, right? Mm-hmm. So it's true that some things that are TE can be externally validated more than others, which is why it's still necessarily neither really subjective nor objective. It's subjective in its validating, but it's objective in its data. So it's a mix of things, just like the other interface function, extroverted feeling, is a mix of things. The only two functions that can meaningfully be called objective and subjective really are FI and TI.
See, when I'm listening to that, I can see someone using something objective for subjective reasons, for personal reasons.
Sure, that's why we only can really talk about deliberation functions as objective and subjective.
I'm not sure.
I mean, if we're talking about functions, if we're talking about other things like objects, well, then we're misusing the terms. We're being metaphorical.
I would just say there that the extroverted logic, being the objective side, is being used for subjective introverted ethics.
Well, I know. Yeah, they're always linked. Right. They're always linked.
Your intentions are going into how something is being done. But in the same way, Eric, I'd say that you could structure and define something in a way which is also being informed by your intentions.
I agree, but you haven't done that. In other words, you could define things differently. You're right. You could define things differently. And you'd need to provide, it would need to stand up in the way that my definitions stand up against each other within the system. And the problem is, you haven't defined things differently in that fashion.
I haven't defined the way you defined it.
Right. In other words, your definitions don't interact with each other in a meaningful way that you can say this is inconsistent with that. You just shift ground and you say, well, that's a dichotomy. That's not a mechanics, and it's just willy nilly.
I don't think it's willy nilly. I can very clearly work out what is external, what is internal.
But you've already agreed that's not that. You've already agreed that locus. You've already agreed that locus of display is not the deciding factor in objectivity and subjectivity. You've already agreed with that.
No, I know, but that's not the definition which I gave at the beginning, Eric. I said I was trying to explain what I meant. That was something which I used, whether it could be displayed externally. The definition I use is whether it can be expressed without being reinterpreted or not.
Okay, but
whether it can be directly transferred to someone else without recalibration.
But what are you describing as objective or subjective then?
Okay, so I'd say that ethics and intuition are both subjective, logic and sensation are both objective.
No, but so you're saying that the function is objective or subjective?
The information aspect.
So not the function, not the function.
No, that's what I tried to say, Eric.
Okay, but information doesn't have meaning extant to people or observers. We've already gone through this.
I I know you said that something doesn't have meaning without people. I think if you were to get rid of all human
Well, then
beings.
we've got down to the basis of the disagreement. We're not going to get any further. No, we're not going to get any further then. Because look,
Okay, but
if you think hold on, stop. If you think meaning exists without people, then we're not going to get any further.
No, I don't think so. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying, Eric. For us to have a meaningful conversation about physical things, we need to treat them as if they exist without us to perceive them.
No, we don't. Then we don't have to treat them like that. To have a meaningful conversation about this, we have to exactly not treat them like that.
So if you bury a memento in the ground and you return to it, 50 years later, you're treating it as if it exists without you being there to observe it. That's how something has meaning for us. We have to treat it as something which exists without us to observe it.
The same with we've observed it going into the ground, Jack.
No, but I mean that's an example. Or for instance,
object permanence is not a negation of observation; it's a proof of observation. You have to observe it in the first place for object permanence to be meaningful at all.
So we don't have. So you're saying that anything which is physical to not.
Jack, if you're going to say that basically these meanings exist outside of people observing them or creating meanings about them, then we're not going to get any further than that because it's simply not the case, and I can't argue any further than that. It's like you've already dissembled me all the way down to the bottom here, where we're arguing about whether meaning exists without people. That's in order to avoid you acknowledging that you don't have a meaningful definition of objective and subjective like I do. My definition is definitely preferable, and I've given you a clear definition, and you've not argued why yours is preferable. Mine actually lines up with how people use the words.
The reason why I don't think yours is preferable is because it's conflating how something is felt with whether something is communicable without reinterpretation or not.
Okay, but Jack, all meaning is interpretation of some sort, okay? That's what an intentional manner is. Jack, okay, we're not getting any further. Let's just call it. We're not getting any further. You're not. If you want to insist that meaning exists without people, then we're not going to get any further. Sorry.
Well, but we have to treat it as if it does.
No, Jack, we don't have to. It's exactly what I'm doing. Is I'm not treating it like that. I'm being smart.
But that's not being smart because then you can't actually relate to physical objects in the way which actually.
No, you can, Jack. You need to treat it as though it were what it is, namely, intentional manners exist within people, not outside of them.
So when you're so can you explain to me a bit more about object permanence then and how you approach it in a way in which something still exists?
Object permanence is essentially object permanence is proto-SI. In other words, it's the first form of SI that people experience in their life, and what it says is that my experience can be used to anticipate the future. In other words, I can successfully map out the future by anticipating that things that are not agents will not move unless acted upon. It's a basic heuristic that I learned, and it's a form of proto-SI. In the same way that shape constants is a form of proto-NI, understanding that things have identity beyond your perspective on them.
I'm not sure I would agree with it being assigned to NI and SI, but just saying that object permanent is something which... Are you saying that by being SI, is it subjective now?
SI is neither subjective nor objective, as we've discussed. However, It is the case that if you were going to divide the functions into subjective and objective, in other words, those that are fundamentally an interested approach and versus those that are fundamentally a disinterested approach, then the subjective ones, the interested calculus functions or the interested angle functions would be Fi, Si, Se, and Te. But note that that would be a bastardized reduction because reality is Fi and Ti. Fi is subjective, Ti is objective. The other functions are neither objective nor subjective, but they are all necessarily either on the experiential or communicative domain.
Okay, I mean, that's taken us to slightly a different tangent, I think. I'm just trying to understand.
Keep asking me questions. You'll keep getting clear answers.
Yeah. Okay. So So you say you when you're cooking, say, food, you can leave a room and the object exists. You have object permanence. Is that correct?
Yes.
You have a conceptual object permanence.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So how do you have a conception of object permanence without treating objects as something which exists without you to observe it?
Because I understand that as an observer, that's one quality of the objects in the world, of the sensory world that I exist in.
Right. Okay. But okay.
That doesn't mean those objects exist without observers. It just means that because I'm in a world of observers, objects exist.
But you said if objects don't exist without observers, but when you're not observing it, how can you have object permanence?
I'm still an observer. I didn't say objects don't exist without constant observation. I'm saying objects don't exist without observation. I'm still an observer. I've still observed them at some point.
Oh, right. So it doesn't exist until someone is observed at some time.
Well, look, nothing exists in my reality until I've experienced it in some fashion or another.
Well, it might as well not exist. But
nothing exists in my reality until I've experienced it in some fashion or another, right?
But Eric, in which case, right, I didn't exist until I first stumbled onto your appear in chat.
No,
I didn't.
No, I didn't exist in your reality until you stumbled upon me.
But on the same logic, now I'm willing to give you to show some courtesy to you to tell you that I think you did exist before I was born.
Right. Well, you concluded, and that's a good conclusion to have drawn based on the data you've observed.
Yeah, I mean, I need to sort of, for me to sort of be able to, to treat you as someone who's my equal rather than my inferior. I need to assume that your existence is independent of my observation.
I agree, but I did not exist in your reality until you encountered me.
Well, in the way in which I've been able to make sense of my reality.
Jack, I did not exist in your reality at all until you encountered me. Correct or incorrect?
You didn't exist in my reality. If you frame it as my reality, correct. But why are you framing it in terms of my and your reality?
Because we're talking about observers and how observation impacts ontology.
How observation impacts ontology.
In other words, your reality comprises the totality of your experience plus other linkages, but not things entirely outside of your experience, right?
Okay, but so Eric, are you suggesting that anything which you haven't encountered yet, although it doesn't exist in your reality, there is no other reality for it to exist in? It just doesn't exist until you've experienced it.
No, I'm saying that it exists in the realities of all those who've experienced it.
But how do you know if those people you haven't experienced them? If no one you've experienced has experienced it,
we can't talk about anything at all until we both have experienced it or hypothetically experienced it as we have now.
Yes, but that's the thing. It seems to me that something only exists if you can actually talk about it, if you've had some sort of observation. And I think that is...
in your reality, yeah, that's true. Something only exists when you've had some experience.
It does lead to problems. We do treat things as if they exist before we've experienced them, and that they will continue to exist
once we've experienced them. Right, once we've experienced them, though, right?
Sorry?
Once we've experienced them, we treat them like that.
Yeah, and also, Eric...
But critically, not before we've experienced them.
Sorry?
But critically, not before we've experienced them, right?
Well, we treat things...
No, you didn't treat me as anything until you experienced me, right?
Sorry?
You didn't treat me as anything until you experienced me, right?
No, I didn't treat you as anything, no.
Good,
but now that I've experienced you, I treat you as if you've always existed.
Correct, good. Because that's the power of observation.
You're not in the mortal guardian of the earth or anything like that, but I've treated you as if you existed at least since the 60s.
Not since the 60s.
The 70s, fine, the 70s.
You're making me older than I am, Jack. Okay, so we're in agreement, though, that things don't exist in your reality until you experience them.
Right. In your reality, yeah. But we're not... A major departure, perhaps, from your model, from Socionics, is that Socionics does look at things not just confined to a single person's reality. it's talking about a reality of something separate.
Right. It mistakes the object of analysis for something that can exist independent of actual existent experience, which is one of the mistakes it makes.
Because existent experience.
Well, look, in other words, we can talk about these hypotheticals, right? This is our experience and the experience of people listening to this or whatever. But you have to remember that in each of these hypotheticals, if they were to actually be executed, they would no longer be a hypothetical, and they would no longer retain the qualities of a hypothetical. They would cease to be a hypothetical, they'd be a reality, right? So the problem is we get stuck on the fact that we're talking about hypotheticals, and we imagine that they retain the hypothetical qualities when we convert them into realities, but they don't. And that's where we're going astray here.
I think that the hypothesis that what we experience, until we've experienced it, it doesn't actually exist. I think it's a hypothesis which doesn't seem to intuitively line.
It doesn't exist in your reality. In other words, existence of a thing is something that individual people make happen with their experience of it. It's not. It doesn't. It doesn't happen outside of someone's experience.
Right. Okay. I mean, okay. Let's see if we can. I think there's a slight impasse here, but we can move past while still having a useful conversation. So, if we're talking about how the definition I was using, that information can be communicated without being reconstituted, and that will make it external, right? I don't think that question of object permanence really gets in the way.
Okay, the distinction of reconstituting, like in other words, converting something, it's contingent on you making a distinction between what is felt internally as an emotion that's non-physical and between the physical manifestations of those emotions. We've gotten that part down. Now, I'm going to take exception to that, but I can't exactly explain why. I just say that in my understanding of things, introverted feeling has a physical component to it that you cannot extinguish from the non-physical component to it, or draw a distinction meaningfully and say that one is really the feeling, whereas the physical manifestation of it is really not the feeling. It's some sort of converted feeling. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that feelings, introverted feelings, are fundamentally metaphysical and must be converted into physicality. I think that they're as much physical as they are anything else. So, and that we may just be at an impasse. I don't know how to prove that point. I bet introverted feelers would agree with me, though.
I don't know if introverted feelers would necessarily. Well, I don't know. I need to speak to someone.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. So I'm not really making claims that they would. I'm guessing they would agree that it's physical, but I'm not sure about that. So we're at that point we can say, all right, we've got a different understanding of introverted feeling that neither of us can win this point about introverted feeling right now.
Well, but also I could clarify further what I think is introverted feeling is, and it may be quite different as well. Because I don't actually think that introverted ethics is about an emotional state we go through. I think it's more static, it's more set, and actually reducible. So I think it's more about relationships, how people relate to one another. Say, if I like you as a person, I think that is an introverted ethics. Whereas if I'm experiencing incandescent rage at something you're saying because it's dissembling, I think that's more of an extroverted ethics.
Well, I mean, I would agree with you about my displays of emotion, which link rather weakly to emotions I'm actually feeling. Those would be more for display purposes than for or communication purposes rather than for the actual expressions of actual emotion. But I would say that there are expressions of actual emotion that comprise the engine of that relationship's logic. In other words, we don't understand it, neither of us do, because it's our polar, but that these feelings that people have, and that we have too, and that sometimes make our heart jump and such, that there's a very rich and thorough logic of its own to it that's subjective, that links differing kinds of feelings against each other and compatibility between the feelings, and I might have to give up something I want but get something else I want more, or those kind of trade-offs, or I want to protect this person's feelings but I also want to tell them something that's kind of harsh. Those kind of things, those kind of decisions are decided by introverted feeling in my understanding of the thing. That's a pretty clear definition of it. It tells you how and why introverted feeling links to feelings, not just to ethics. And I don't think it links really to ethics at all. I think it links to personal valuing, interest.
I do think that ethics can be a confusing word. I do think ethics can be a confusing word in that you can have ethical systems, right, which have nothing to do with sociological ethics, like Kantian deontology, for instance, is introverted ethics. So in that sense, I do think there can be something confusing about those definitions. But at the same time, I find feelings can also be confusing because you can also feel things which are physical through sensation. And
I agree that feelings can be confusing in that fashion. That, you know, a lot of people talk about SI feelings as feelings, and a lot of people talk about FI feelings as feelings. However, I think the distinction is pretty clear, and I think it makes sense to call SI feelings SI feelings. You know, like sensations of the body, and introverted feeling, emotional feelings, sensations of an emotional kind, to be introverted feeling. You know, it's a pretty clear enough distinction. I don't quite understand why we are excluding the physical expression of the honest physical expression of feelings from introverted feeling.
Well, I think that, you know, if someone has in terms of introverted feeling specifically, the way that I would define it's more about a certain attitude. It doesn't even have to be expressed at all. In fact, even when it is expressed, it isn't. We don't usually express attitudes through our emotions on our face. Sorry?
What attitudes? And what are emotions?
Well, for instance, attitudes is where someone doesn't like someone. Someone wants to stay away from someone. They don't like them. That's not an emotion. It lasts longer. It doesn't just change with how you're feeling that day.
It's not an emotion. Dislike is not an emotion.
Sorry?
Dislike's not an emotion.
I think it is. It falls under something which is felt. It is a feeling. I'm not sure it's actually an emotion. It's an attitude.
You know, Jack, my FI polar is pretty bad. Your FI polar is shockingly bad. You have You have no concept of feelings whatsoever.
I managed to make it work though.
Yeah, that's not feelings, man. It's like, talk to a feeler about feelings, because what you're talking about is not emotions. And if you don't want to call emotions introverted feeling, then what are emotions?
But emotions are based on, say, the hormones going through your brain, different chemicals. It's how you feel in the moment, and how people will feel at some other point. It's not a more stable attitude towards someone.
So when you value someone a lot and they die and you feel sad, that doesn't involve any emotions, because that's a stable valuing.
When you feel sad, then it's emotions, yes.
But that's just temporary.
When you value them a lot, and you just know that regardless of how you're feeling that moment, if you're angry with them, if you're sad with them, if you're very pleased with them, they're still your friend, and you're loyal to them. That concept is not something which I know you and I are very familiar with, but is how introverted ethics types in Socionics, at least, will approach things.
Okay, well, that sounds like a system made by an FI polar person, frankly. All right, I'm tired of this now. I think it got fairly, whatever. I'm glad it got more cordial.
Let's finish for now, but I think I have other points to discuss, and maybe we can have future debates about these other points. So maybe we cover some ground in that.
Yeah, but look, the thing is this, Jack. I don't want to play this game where I negate and you scramble. You know, it's like, if you want to debate this again, you come in and negate my system.
Okay, I don't think that I've scrambled. If anything, I feel that you've changed what you're saying a lot more than I have.
Okay, well, I mean, I disagree with you. I disagree with you, because here's why. Look, here's why, Jack. I've really tried to pin you down on what things mean, right?
I've tried to give very clear answers to what things mean.
Okay, so we agree then that we've reached an impasse on the introverted feeling thing, right?
Okay, I think we've reached a few impasses. But I think also now we're going to have a meta argument.
Okay, but listen, if we've reached an impasse, and you agree we've reached an impasse, then we've successfully communicated, right? We've gotten to where we can't go any further, correct?
I think at first time, yes. I think we have reached an impasse on this particular point. I think there are other points.
So we have successfully communicated, correct?
Yeah, I think now we have. It took a while, but I think we have.
Jack, it did take a while.
Yes.
It did. But listen, the thing is, to say that you have not scrambled and dissembled here.
I don't think I did. I've
Okay,
tried to
then
be.
Jack, listen to me. Then Jack, listen. Next time you come in and negate my system.
Okay, I'll try. I need to be as familiar as I can with your system, so I know what question to ask you. I've tried to look things. I've looked at documents to help me, but I'm still struggling to get a clear, coherent view of your
All
system.
you need to do is ask me. Listen, Jack. The thing is, there's two kinds of answers to questions. There's answers that are definitive and designed to help the other person parse. And there are answers to questions that are non-definitive and designed to prevent the other person from parsing. You're giving the latter kind of answer. It's frustrating to me. I will give you the former kind of answer so you can do the logical work you need to actually test my system. You're preventing me from testing yours logically. That's the truth.
I don't think that's the truth.
Then let's go right now. Just start asking me questions so you can see what the answers look like when they're good kind of answers. Go.
Okay. Well, Eric, it's good to talk to you, and I wish you well. Take care, and thank you everyone for also watching the debate today. And speak soon. Bye everyone.
Pretty depressing. I knew that was going to be depressing.
I know you did.
I knew that going in.
Want to go for a ride? I don't understand because, like, you guys were on the break.
He's not. He doesn't want to. He wants to try to debate me. That's the thing. It's like I don't want to debate. It's a waste of my time and energy.
People were even saying that, like you had it.
I don't want to debate the guy. That's the thing. He's not. He's trying to avoid things. He's trying to give me fucking half-assed answers about shit and.
Not full answers.
It's like I'm trying to get somewhere, and it's like this is just purely frustrating because this person's trying to debate me, and I'm trying to fucking clarify things.
I know.
And I've got a hate monkey in the autonomy. I knew that was going to happen at some point during this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, who is that?
Oh, it's probably Becky or
No, it was a dude's face.
Who knows? I don't know who it was.
Face, you can see in the caption.
I don't know who it was, but whoever it was, it's like that's why I didn't really want to do it in autonomy. I wanted to try to avoid that kind of hate monkey shit, but whatever, hate monkeys hate.
I'm gonna look at your thing of numerology if you don't mind. I'm
just went exactly as I anticipated it would go.
I know.
There's no interest in actually clarifying things and working towards a definitive conclusion about anything.
Yeah, but you know inside somewhere he knows that, and that's annoying.
Well, look, I'm not worried about that. I think he thinks he gave clear answers to things, but he's not. We're not working within the same basic framework. He tried to, in some sense, give me clear answers. He said, well, whether or not something needs to be converted. I pointed out that you can externalize introverted feelings, and it doesn't make them objective all of a sudden. And he just sort of shifted his definition to mean, well, it has to be converted. And it's like, but how is that a conversion? How is crying converting your introverted feeling? It's not a meaningful conversion of things. And it's like the fact that we had to argue this down to this little fucking point just to get him to even to agree that we reached an impasse where he wouldn't agree that introverted feeling, that crying is introverted feeling. You know, it's like if you want to agree crying is introverted feeling, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, is it?
I mean,
what is?
His definition is arbitrary, too. Why would it be the case that just because something needs to be converted to be externalized And he's shifting definitions as he goes along, you know?
That's confusing then.
Well, look, the point is, it doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter whether...
But you're right, though. Everyone saw, like, everyone heard your point. And, like...
I don't. It doesn't matter. That's not. It's like, for God's sakes.
Did you want him to learn?
I don't know what I expected. I just didn't want that. I didn't want to have to battle every little fucking point out to the end of the earth, trying to get him to agree with anything. You know, and that's exactly what I got. He wasn't looking to work with me, which is not to be surprising because it's supposedly a debate. But I don't like debating. Debating is for competition.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's like, if I wanted to debate something, you've got to have things structured certain ways, and so you can't just go into arguing with people and expect anything worthwhile to happen.
That's like in Cobra Kai, if someone like was reframing the rules.
Well, I don't know. It's not that. It's like, I can't blame Jack. I knew this was going to happen. It's exactly what... Jack did the best thing he could possibly do as a debate strategy, which is avoid things. Avoid my questions, run away from them. And then give things that sound like answers. But, you know, when you test those answers, they don't work. There's no reason to think that because something has to be converted into a different form, like introverted thinking, does it have to be converted to a different form? Well, yeah, actually, when I think the logic of something, I convert it to a different form when I extrovert it because I use some extroverted feeling in the display of it or the conveyance of it or something. I mean, the point is, it's not a meaningful gauge to distinguish between the things.
Oh, is this recording?
I'm still live streaming. I never stopped live streaming. Of course, what it all boils down to, okay, so why are you defining this way? What are you going to do with this definition? I knew that was going to frustrate the fuck out of me. I knew I shouldn't get involved in it. I knew it was lose, lose, lose. I can't win that debate. There's no way I can win it.
Yeah, but he didn't win it either, so...
I can't win it because I'm expected to completely dominate the thing. But I'm not even trying to debate the guy. I'm trying to have a conversation with him where he's making some progress in his thinking. We're actually realizing that we need to define terms meaningfully. But he's not interested in defining terms meaningfully. He's interested in not defining terms meaningfully. So what if I did get him to pin him down, finally do a meaningful definition, sort of objective and subjective that we could possibly use? Okay, so now, why did I have to fight that hard to get you to acknowledge the problems with your definition? Because you're not trying to be right, you're trying not to be wrong.
You said, I find it hard to understand Eric when he speaks quickly and takes into concepts I'm currently unfamiliar with, I'm trying to understand.
It's whatever, it's not his fault. It's not Jack's fault at all, it's my fault entirely.
What's your fault?
Because I knew going into this exactly what was going to happen. And I just let it happen.
So, is it like you went against your better judgment?
It's like I didn't approach the thing willfully enough. I don't know. I don't know if I could have done... I don't know if there's any way to salvage something like that anyway. It's like we're talking about different things, fundamentally. And I'm having to argue outside the city gates the whole time. Trying to get him to understand that we're talking about different things, first of all. those kind of arguments. I fucking hate it. Like pulling teeth.
So, like, maybe ENTPs and ENTPs are just not supposed to debate. It just seems like it's such always lose-lose. I don't know, like...
Well, if all you're doing is playing defense the whole time,
Yeah.
then it's, it's a battle of attrition trying to get anywhere. I've had these kind of fights with ex-wives and stuff. And, it's like, that's what it reminds me of. I don't mind competition flow debate where I'm coming up with cases for the kids because there's an understanding of some basic rules that everybody's applying here. That everybody has coming up with a framework. There's a resolution that's being debated. There's some concrete shit laid down, It makes it meaningful to debate an issue. This shit, it's like, we're trying to debate in a different currency. And it's incredibly frustrating for me. I mean, people are right to condemn me for yelling and getting angry and stuff like that. People are absolutely right to condemn me for that. Which is why I'm frustrated with myself. But, I need to understand that when I go into this sort of thing, if I choose to do it, I need to understand what I'm getting into. And I did, and
So he says, it's true, I wasn't going on the offense at all. I don't tend to be aggressive enough in a debate.
I mean, I wasn't looking for offense either, Jack. I was just looking for progress. But look, it's my fault. It's all. I'm not trying to blame Jack at all here. This is a learning opportunity for me. I'm gonna have to be a stronger person. It's weak of me to just allow frustration to replace my better judgment. And I'm gonna need to grow up a little bit.
He says he doesn't lose his temper ever. It's a profound trait of mine and an odd one. I mean, maybe he's a 5 or a 9. I'll give you a 9. 5's
I mean, I wouldn't want myself to be like that, but I wish I hadn't gotten upset or yelly during this.
He says, I want progress too, Eric. I appreciate you.
Well, thanks, Jack. Regardless, that's what this channel does for me, is it gives me a lot of different growth opportunities. This being one of them. I anticipated the hate monkey showing up. That's why I was thinking we were going to do Google Hangouts maybe. But all in all, could have gone worse. I could have gotten more upset. I guess I'm pretty lax on myself sometimes. Please. I love you, Rachel.
I love you, Harvey.
Fortunately, I've got my Rachel LaVachel here. She always makes me feel better.
I like making things feel better. And this was, this is a long time coming, what just happened. Jack is young.
Yeah, I know. That's another reason why I'm frustrated with myself. It's growing up on YouTube.
Yep.
I'm pretty young too.
You are. You are. You know that.
You know?
Yep. You're learning too.
Yeah, I am. I'm constantly learning things on YouTube. Usually learning new ways to apologize.
Aww. I'm dunking my cookies in the coffee. Ever.
There's not, you didn't by any chance, you don't put alcohol in coffee ever, do you?
Have I ever?
Like around here. Like
No,
you
why?
sometimes pour whiskey in a cup of coffee.
No.
Because this coffee I had this morning, I poured new coffee on, so a little bit of old coffee from yesterday, and it tasted so much like it had whiskey in it. I'm not sure. It was some sort of like maybe there was dipped cookie in it or
Yes.
something.
Lollipop.
Lollipop,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. It was chocolate.
Mm. That really makes coffee taste like Irish coffee.
Wow. Actually,
Like
that's
so much so I was like, is there alcohol in this?
Wow. No, I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't do that. But
I know.
yeah.
I was 99.99% sure because when would you be getting like little bottles of alcohol and stuff and sneaking them around? I can't even conceive of it, you know?
Imagine?
Well, I mean, we're always together. What would you-
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like when I be like every time we go to the like the Bevmo or like Whole Foods, I'm like sneaking them in my pocket.
There you go. Ooh, I left my sunglasses in there. I'll be right back.
Exactly. Nah. No, good taste buds though, because it was like it wasn't like milk chocolate. It was more like caramel chocolate.
Yeah, the chocolate flavor of the chocolate Tootsie Pops is not really chocolate per se. Well, I'm going to look at this chat here. So, wow, this is a lot of viewers in this stream. Thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna wrap it is up. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. Okay? If you do, next time eat twice as much.